A sweeping aerial shot of 19th century New York City, smoke rising from factories, horse-drawn carriages crossing cobblestone streets. The camera slowly zooms into a grand office building with towering windows. In a world where power was measured not by votes but by wealth, one man quietly commanded more influence than the President of the United States. His name, J.P. Morgan, cut to black, and white photographs of Morgan, his stern gaze facing the camera, a banker, a financier, a titan whose reach shaped economies, toppled industries, and rewrote the rules of America. Archival footage of steamboats on the Hudson River, factories, railroad construction, bustling stock markets. Born in 1837, John Pierpont Morgan inherited wealth, but not the limits of ambition. He didn't just manage money, he controlled it. By the dawn of the 20th century, his influence was unmatched. Railroads, steel, banking. If America moved, J.P. Morgan moved it first. Cut to an animated map showing Morgan's holdings spreading across industries. In 1901, he orchestrated the creation of U.S. Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation. One man, one deal, reshaping the entire industrial landscape of a nation. Visuals, steel mills glowing with molten metal, workers silhouetted against fires, 1907. The country teetered on the edge of financial collapse. Banks failed, people panicked, the government hesitated, and yet one man stepped forward. J.P. Morgan called together the nation's leading bankers, pooled their resources, and single-handedly stopped the panic. More than a president, he had the power to stabilize a nation with a single phone call. Cut to dramatic reenactment of Morgan seated at a massive desk, dictating instructions while the nation waits. His intervention wasn't just heroism, it was proof. Money was power, and in the hands of J.P. Morgan, power was absolute. Dawn breaks over 19th century New York City. Smoke rises from factory chimneys, horse-drawn carriages navigate cobblestone streets, and merchants shout across bustling marketplaces. The camera slowly moves toward a grand townhouse, its windows glinting in the early morning light. Background music, subtle, suspenseful strings with a rising undertone, hinting at ambition and possibility. Narrator deep, resonant tone. John PowerPoint Morgan was born in 1837 in a world on the cusp of transformation. America was expanding, industries were rising, railroads were stretching across the continent, and the seeds of modern capitalism were being sown. Into this world, a man would emerge whose vision, ambition, and cunning would redefine wealth, power, and the very structure of the American economy. Visuals, black and white photographs of Morgan as a young man, juxtaposed with sketches of early banks and trading floors. Morgan inherited money, but he didn't inherit limits. From the very beginning, he understood that wealth was not just a measure of success. It was a tool to shape companies, markets, and ultimately nations. While others saw numbers on a ledger, Morgan saw influence, control, and opportunity. Visuals, animated map of the United States highlighting the growing railroads and industrial hubs. In the post-Civil War era, America was rebuilding itself, and industries like steel, railroads, and electricity were booming. Morgan recognized that these industries weren't just businesses. They were the arteries of a new economic superpower. He began consolidating failing railroads, merging them into more efficient networks, and in doing so, he became more than a banker. He became a force that could dictate the flow of commerce across a nation. Visuals, montage of railroads under construction, steel mills glowing with molten metal, and bustling stock exchanges. But it wasn't just railroads. Morgan's ambition reached every corner of industry. By the late 1800s, he controlled critical parts of steel, mining, and electricity. He brokered deals that other financiers only dreamed of, and with each successful merger, his reputation grew. He was no longer simply managing money, he was shaping America itself. Visuals, animated graphics showing Morgan's acquisitions spreading across industries, connecting lines like a web of influence. Perhaps his most audacious achievement came in 1901 with the creation of U.S. Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation. One man had orchestrated a merger so vast, so transformative, that it changed the very scale of business. It was a bold statement in the hands of J.P. Morgan. Finance wasn't just about profit, it was about power. Visuals, archival photos of U.S. steel factories, molten steel flowing, workers silhouetted against towering furnaces. Morgan's rise was not without strategy. He cultivated relationships with other powerful financiers, politicians, and industrialists. His influence was invisible, yet omnipresent. He could broker a deal that would save a company, or quietly dismantle one that resisted his vision. To understand Morgan was to understand that in the modern era, control of money meant control of destiny. Visuals, close-ups of Morgan in his office, dictating letters, reviewing documents, and speaking with associates, the camera lingering on his calm, calculating demeanor. By the turn of century, J.P. Morgan was no longer just a banker. He was a titan, a symbol of ambition, unbound by convention, and a man whose reach extended far beyond Wall Street. His name became synonymous with influence, wealth, and the quiet power that moved markets and nations alike. Visuals, dramatic aerial shot of New York City skyline at sunset, skyscrapers casting long shadows, suggesting both growth and looming power. Narrator, the rise of J.P. Morgan was not merely a personal triumph, it was the rise of an era where the boundaries between money and authority blurred, where a single individual could wield influence that rivaled the office of the president. And as Morgan's empire grew, the question became not whether he would shape America, but how far his vision and his ambition would reach. Background music, crescendo of strings and horns evoking awe and anticipation. In the story of modern America, J.P. Morgan was more than a financier. He was a force of nature. And this is where his legend begins, fade to black, leaving the audience with a lingering sense of power and curiosity about the man who would come to hold more sway than a president. Panoramic shot of Wall Street in the early 1900s, horse-drawn carriages jostling for space, bustling crowds outside banks, and the frantic energy of the stock market. The camera slowly moves toward the New York clearinghouse, where bankers congregate. Background music, intensifying strings with a subtle heartbeat rhythm, evoking tension and urgency. Narrator, deep, commanding tone. In 1907, America faced a crisis unlike any before. Panic rippled through banks and markets. Investors withdrew their funds. Trust, the lifeblood of the economy, evaporated overnight. The nation teetered on the edge of collapse. And in the midst of chaos, the government hesitated, powerless to act. That was when one man stepped forward. John Pierpont Morgan. Visuals, black and white photographs of crowded bank lobbies, anxious depositors, and telegraph operators sending urgent messages. Morgan was not a public official. He held no political office, yet he commanded the kind of authority that could rival presidents. With a simple call, he summoned the nation's leading bankers to a single room. Together, They devised a plan to stabilize the faltering banks and restore confidence in the financial system. One man, one vision, saving an entire economy. Visuals, dramatic reenactment of Morgan sitting at a massive oak desk, dictating instructions while bankers frantically take notes. Outside, crowds of worried citizens murmur and shuffle. Over the next few days, Morgan orchestrated a series of loans and coordinated interventions. His influence was absolute. By pooling private resources and controlling the flow of capital, he stemmed the panic that threatened to engulf the nation. The 1907 crisis became a defining moment, demonstrating that in the world of finance, power often lies not in the office of a president, but in the hands of those who control money. Visuals, animated graphics showing the flow of capital from Morgan's network to struggling banks across the country. This was the paradox of Morgan's power. He was invisible yet omnipresent. Presidents consulted him, senators deferred to him, corporations trembled at his decisions. While government leaders debated policy, Morgan acted decisively, reshaping the destiny of the nation without a single vote. Visuals, archival newspaper clippings with headlines such as "Morgan saves the nation" and political cartoons depicting him as a puppet master pulling strings behind closed doors. Yet, power of this magnitude came with controversy. Critics accused Morgan of being a kingmaker, manipulating markets for his own gain, and consolidating wealth and influence into a single, nearly unassailable empire. To some, he was a savior, to others, a shadow ruler. But whether revered or reviled, his impact was undeniable. Visuals, slow-motion shots of Morgan inspecting steel mills, walking through banks, and shaking hands with powerful industrialists, his presence commanding attention and respect. The 1907 panic also revealed a deeper truth about the American system. The government's hesitation highlighted a critical vulnerability. In times of crisis, the fate of the nation often depended on individuals, not institutions. Morgan's intervention was a masterclass in private power shaping public destiny. His actions stabilized the economy, but they also posed a chilling question. What happens when so much influence rests in the hands of one man? Visuals, modern-day juxtaposition, Wall Street today, electronic stock tickers flashing, skyscrapers towering. Echoes of Morgan's invisible hand shaping markets a century later. Morgan's reach extended far beyond crisis management. He dictated terms in industries as diverse as railroads, steel, and electricity. Companies that resisted his influence often found themselves merged, acquired, or dismantled. He was both architect and arbiter, building empires while controlling their fate. Visuals, dramatic zoo, mins on Morgan's hand signing documents, contrasted with images of workers and small investors affected by his decisions. By the early 20th century, the line between public authority and private power had blurred. Morgan was more than a financier. He was a kingmaker in the modern age. Presidents, lawmakers, and industrialists all recognized it. And in a time when America's financial systems were still fragile, his influence ensured that one man could steer the course of history. Visuals, sunset over Manhattan's skyline, skyscrapers casting long shadows, symbolizing both growth and unseen power. Narrator reflective, dramatic tone. 1907 financial panic cemented Morgan's legacy as a man whose power rivaled that of the presidency. He was proof that in a nation built on wealth and ambition, influence often lay not in laws or votes, but in the hands of those who control capital. Morgan's story challenges us to look beyond the surface of authority, to question who truly holds power in shaping the destiny of a nation. Background music fades to a deep, resonant piano note, leaving viewers with a sense of awe and contemplation. Fade to black, a slow aerial sweep over modern Manhattan, skyscrapers glinting in the sunlight, Wall Street buzzing with activity. The camera then pans to the iconic J.P. Morgan Chase building, its architecture echoing both tradition and power. Background music, sweeping orchestral tones, reflective yet powerful, evoking both awe and contemplation. Narrator deep, resonant tone. John Pierpont Morgan passed away in 1913, but his influence did not die with him. His name, his institutions, and his vision continue to shape the world of finance and, in many ways, the very foundation of modern America. Visuals, archival images of Morgan's funeral, mourners lining the streets, juxtaposed with footage of bustling modern banks and digital trading floors. Morgan left behind an empire of finance unparalleled in his time. He built institutions, consolidated industries, and created a legacy that transcended mere wealth. But more importantly, he left behind lessons about power, ambition, and the unseen forces that shape nations. Visuals, slow-motion shots of traders, bankers, and executives walking through grand office halls, the camera lingering on hands moving money, contracts being signed, echoes of Morgan's legacy. His story is a study in contrasts. On one hand, he was a visionary, a man who saw opportunities where others saw chaos, a stabilizer who could prevent economic collapse when institutions faltered. The 1907 financial panic is proof. In moments of uncertainty, his decisions safeguarded millions of livelihoods, prevented widespread bank failures, and restored confidence in a nation's economy. Visuals, dramatic reenactment of the 1907 crisis. Bankers frantically coordinating loans, Morgan dictating orders with calm authority, citizens lining up at banks. On the other hand, Morgan was a reminder of the dangers of concentrated power. His influence extended far beyond the banking sector. Railroads, steel, mining. Industries bowed to his vision and decisions. Presidents, legislators, and business leaders all recognized the weight of his authority. He was both revered and feared, admired for his genius yet criticized for his monopolistic reach. The question remains, can any individual wield such power without altering the course of history? Visuals, newspaper headlines, political cartoons depicting Morgan as a puppet master, juxtaposed with modern stock market graphs and global financial networks. Morgan's legacy is also a lesson in the enduring nature of influence. Institutions like J.P. Morgan & Co., now J.P. Morgan Chase, continue to dominate global finance, a living testament to his foresight. What he built did not crumble with his death. It evolved, expanded, and adapted, proof that true power is not transient but structural. Visuals, slow pan across the modern city skyline, lights flickering on as evening descends, symbolizing ongoing energy, growth, and control. Beyond institutions and wealth, Morgan's life teaches us about the human element of power. It is not enough to possess resources. One must have vision, decisiveness, and the courage to act when others hesitate. In times of crisis, leadership is defined not by titles or elections, but by the ability to shape outcomes and bear responsibility. Visuals, montage of leaders in modern boardrooms, government officials consulting economists, young entrepreneurs navigating technology, driven market echoes of Morgan's influence across generations. Perhaps most importantly, his story challenges us to examine the invisible forces that govern society. The laws of finance, commerce, and influence often operate beyond public view. Decisions made in boardrooms can ripple through economies, impact livelihoods, and alter history. Morgan reminds us that the balance of power is never as simple as it seems, and that individuals armed with ambition and strategy can wield influence rivaling that of nations. Visuals fade to archival portraits of Morgan, his intense gaze meeting the camera, overlaid with modern shots of global finance in motion. In the end, J.P. Morgan's life is more than a biography. It is a parable, a story of vision and ambition, of responsibility and consequence. It teaches us that wealth, when coupled with determination and insight, can become a force of profound impact. But it also warns us, concentrated power, unchecked, can challenge the very institutions meant to balance it. Visuals, sunset over Manhattan, the city glowing, symbolizing enduring legacy and influence. Narrator, reflective, powerful tone. J.P. Morgan shaped more than markets. He shaped the very idea of modern finance. His lessons endure, reminding us that true power often lies in the unseen hands that guide nations, economies, and history itself. And as we navigate a world still dominated by wealth and influence, we are left to ask, who holds the reins of power today, and what legacy will they leave behind? Background music, crescendo into a final, haunting chord, leaving the audience with awe and contemplation. Fade to black.